This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inside Out Smile. I'm your host, Dr. Amber Q, and I'd like to ask if you've ever felt that moment when summer finally exhales, when the air cools and the light just turns golden, and suddenly everything around you whispers, "Oh, it's time for change." I've mentioned this before, but we think change comes from big decisions. We think a new job, breaking up a relationship, moving across, towns, cities, countries. But really, most change, it does sneak in quietly. It's like that first morning when you need a sweater. We've had that recently in the UK. And it's like that moment when you wake up and you realise that you're not excited by what used to light you up. I've certainly had that in my past. But I think that's the signal. And it's not failure, but it's of seasons shifting within you. One of my friends recently decided to resign from her post, and she was like, "Hey, it's not a rash decision, do you think, Amber?" And I was kind of like, well, no, I actually think it's a great success knowing that something doesn't work for you and, changing. I've said that to many people going through a variety of life transitions. And I feel that nature and the changing of the seasons, really, nature is our greatest teacher, because every season has its purpose, right? Spring is beautiful. It just blooms. And summer is just gorgeous and lush and green. Although we did have a bit of a dry summer in the UK. But generally, everything is lush. It just feels expansive and gorgeous. And then in the autumn, everything is slightly releasing. And it's funny because one of my friends said about winter that winter is nature sleeping. And I guess that's it. Winter is a time of rest for nature. But we're always kind of looking to be expansive and constantly growing and performing and producing, always on. And I've noticed this in myself, actually. But the thing is, nothing grows non-stop, right? Even though I have said before that, you're either growing or you're decaying, but there is the point of renewal within that. And I think that renewal is really about honoring the moments when things change, right? And when your energy pulls inward, and basically you're kind of renewing yourself or making changes because perhaps your old identity doesn't fit you anymore. So you want to change a bit. And I feel that sometimes we don't listen to that, right? We don't listen to that stillness. We try to resist it. And I think that we do need to listen to it, because that is when we can actually renew ourselves. And that's such an important part of growth. I think renewal, I would include it in there. But I think the thing is that we all get stuck in that kind of idea because the media feeds it to us of transformation. Everyone wants to reach the peak, but they don't want to do the climb. And the thing is that before we can let something new in, something has to go to make space of it, right? And so change is something that I think, whether it's a job that just doesn't make sense anymore, whether it's a routine that initially worked for you, but it doesn't work for you now with the changing of the seasons, for example, we just I was definitely clinging to summer. And I think the thing is that sometimes, and especially when we're doing things that are related to, I think, our livelihood or our income, we can cling on to certain things like jobs, thinking that we're being loyal. But is that really loyalty, or is it really fear? And is it fear of stillness, or maybe fear of not knowing what's on the other side? But I think the thing is that if we look at nature and we take our lesson from nature, right, we see that, initially the tree has full foliage, but then in autumn, the leaves let go. They just fall. And the tree knows in its infinite wisdom, well, not infinite wisdom, but its wisdom, that, this is just the cycle of nature. And they're going to do this every year. And so similarly, if we look back to our own sort of experiences, heartbreak, burnout, loss, it is letting go of something, because everything changes and nothing is permanent and nothing belongs to us. And in a sense, we're preparing for the next stage. So we can't rush growth. We have to we have to respect, the rhythm, really, I think, of life, even though we want to rush. And I think, for that inner growth, we really kind of need to kind of surrender to it, And I think sometimes it does seem that things aren't happening, maybe because things are, happening very slowly. And I think that's time when we do have to remember that small things are still momentum. And it's when you make those small steps, and they get integrated. And this is kind of where you start to build and rebuild. And that's not necessarily visible. We've all seen that whole iceberg diagram, which is kind of nature as well. But let's go back to the tree, because I think the thing is that, the other day I was speaking to, I can't remember what they're called, the people who examine soil, artorists or something like that. Anyway, and this guy was saying to me, you have the tree above and the roots mirror literally the tree above. So the roots are really wide and deep. I thought that was so fascinating, looking at the tree, especially as it's near my house. And the thing is that, we're not always meant to, show what we're building, right? And also the other thing is we're not meant to bloom all the time. We're meant to rest, to heal, to listen. And, spring comes when it's time, right? It's not going to come when we want it. It's going to come according to the cycle. And nature obviously is ready to receive it when it finally arrives. So I think the reason I'm using this analogy is that I guess what I'm trying to say is that, transformation has its moment, right? There's a moment in time where we decide, hey, who am I, or who have I been, and who do I want to become, right? So sometimes it can happen in a big moment where you decide, oh my God, I've just had enough. This is it. And sometimes you just kind of think, yeah, I don't know if I can carry on with this. And so I think, sometimes when we make these decisions, they can be quite subtle. And sometimes they can be quite, what's the opposite of being subtle? Quite explicit, I guess. I don't even know if that's the opposite of subtlety. I don't have thesaurus on me at the moment, but it can be quite explicit. And I think that's the pivot point, right? It's when we just realize that we want to do something new, and then we kind of do things to make those changes. We pivot, right? And then one day it happens, right? You wake up, you feel better, everything feels brighter. And the thing is, the world hasn't changed, but we have. And I think this is so wonderful. I've often said that when we wake up, it's kind of like, every day that we wake up, everything is kind of generally the same. But, one day we're grumpy, one day we're really happy. And it's because we've changed internally. And it's because we have our own seasons, right? Like nature, we have our own seasons. And it's about who we're becoming as well. And so I think in those moments, depending on what we're doing, I don't know, like, are you in winter at the moment? Or are you ready for your spring? Or are you at that point where your winter is becoming spring? Or are you just like in summer and it's glorious for you right now? I don't know, because growth isn't linear. It does its own thing, And what I've noticed in life is that if we don't learn a lesson, and I saw this the other day actually in an Islamic lecture, that if you don't learn the lesson comes back to teach you, and maybe with kind of different layers as well, because depending on how you've learned the lesson, what I've noticed in my life is the lesson can return in a slightly different way. And when it returns in a different way, if I learn from it, I discover something new about myself on that particular occasion. And so I think it's just so interesting because, it's not that I particularly understand the pattern, but I'm just learning about myself in different ways. And I think that, as I said, growth and renewal is part of that cycle, right? And it's wonderful because within that, we are blooming, we're releasing, we're rising, and then we're resting. Or actually, I should say it in the order that maybe we're going to, I don't know. It depends, right? What stage of the cycle you're at. Are you resting at the moment, doing things under the iceberg or like the trees, the roots of the trees? And then are you going to rise and kind of release your talents and bloom and blossom? I think it's just wonderful because I think if we align with that, it just makes life easier and better, right? So it's kind of like, what is your challenge? I don't know, that you're facing at the moment in your life? Because I think what you should do is go out, feel the shift in the air, see how the colors fade and how the just ground feels so different, and ask yourself, what part of me is changing right now? What do I need to release? And what do I need to grow? And, take a notebook with you, or you can use your phone for a voice note. But I think, write it down if you can, because that's better actually for sort of remembering. And let your words become the seeds of your future. Because at the end of the day, change is constant. The seasons change and we change. And that's because, I don't know if you can hear all that noise in the background, the gardeners, the sirens. But the point is that everything is connected and we're connected to nature. We come from nature, right? We're made from clay. We're going to return to the earth. And so I really think that it's really, it's really important and poignant to feel that we are nature in ourselves. And I think we've really lost that living in cities and things. And so right now we're in autumn. And I think, sometimes we can have that fear of the oncoming winter. But I think, do you know what? If we actually just watch those leaves turn and twirl as they fall, we can think to ourselves, hey, this is a time for renewal for me, for my own inner growth or personal transformation, or maybe emotional healing, or I don't know, spiritual renewal or something. But we've really got to live consciously, because we are nature and nature is us, and it's all connected. So until the next episode, let's all create connection within ourselves, with nature, with others, and let's not just change lives, but save lives.